The Galactic Council's chamber thrummed with tension as representatives from every corner of the galaxy convened, their holographic projections flickering with faint static. The air shimmered with the mix of species-specific atmospheres, each contained within shimmering energy bubbles. High Chancellor Velar Matik, a crystalline being whose sharp facets gleamed under the chamber lights, struck their gavel-like appendage against the podium, emitting a resonant chime that echoed through the hall. "Order!" Velar commanded, their voice vibrating like an ancient chime. "This emergency session is called to discuss the most pressing issue of our time, the humans." A collective groan rippled through the council. Representative Plom, a gelatinous violet entity from the Yulkor swarm, burbled in frustration. "Do we really need another meeting about those chaos bringers? Last cycle they built an interstellar engine out of scrap metal, and what did they call it? Duct tape. That abomination nearly ruptured the fabric of space. Yes, and let us not forget," chittered Zix-427, an arachnid from the Nest Confederation, tapping several of their limbs against the table. "These creatures consume toxic substances recreationally. Alcohol, they call it. They even ingest plants that actively burn their senses. Spicy food. Truly, they defy logic." Velar raised a gleaming hand to silence the room. "The problem isn't their peculiar habits," they intoned, their voice heavy with crystalline authority. "It's their adaptability. Humans come from Earth, a Class 12 Deathworld, a planet where the environment itself seeks to eradicate them daily, and yet they thrive." The chamber dimmed as a hologram of Earth materialized, spinning lazily in its orbit. Images of erupting volcanoes, devastating hurricanes, and towering tsunamis flickered in rapid succession. Several representatives recoiled. A gaseous being from the Nebel cluster condensed into a tighter form, emitting a faint, horrified whistle. "They survive this?" whispered an avian delegate, their feathers trembling. "They don't just survive," said Velar, their voice rising in pitch. "They excel. Earth has faced extinction-level events, asteroid impacts, ice ages, supervolcanoes, and the humans not only endure but write poetry about them." Plom quivered, their mass rippling with visible unease. "They sound unstoppable." "That," Velar said, pointing a crystalline limb at the Earth hologram, "is precisely the issue. In the past century alone, humans have developed artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and quantum technologies. If they continue unchecked, they will surpass every civilization represented here within 50 cycles." The room erupted into a cacophony of voices. Words like containment, exile, and eradication echoed across the chamber, though none dared speak too loudly for fear of sparking a war. Amid the chaos, Dezek, an antennaed insectoid being, raised their voice, sharp and crackling. "High Chancellor," they said, their tone measured, "what do you propose? Surely you're not suggesting a war against these innovators. Our fleets would crumble." Velar paused, allowing the weight of their next words to settle. "No," they said, their crystalline form brightening with satisfaction. "We don't need war. We need exile." The chamber fell silent, save for the faint hum of the holographic projectors. A new image materialized, a dark, forbidding planet wreathed in swirling storms of diamond dust and lit by the faint glow of distant stars. Terminus. "This," Velar declared, "is a Class 15 Deathworld. Recently discovered, it boasts an atmosphere so dense it forms solid crystal shards in its storms. Predators the size of dreadnoughts roam its surface. Its terrain is a maze of toxic swamps, volcanic pits, and carnivorous flora." Zix-427 clicked their mandibles thoughtfully. "Even humans couldn't survive there." "Precisely," Velar said, their crystalline facets gleaming. "We offer them this world under the guise of colonial expansion. Let their ingenuity be their undoing." The council voted unanimously, their voices tinged with relief and satisfaction. The relocation orders were drafted immediately. It wasn't long before the humans, who'd been suspiciously quiet during the session, were presented with their opportunity. The humans' reaction, as always, was anything but predictable. "Let me get this straight," Commander David Chen said, leaning back in his chair aboard the Icarus Ascendant. His expression was a mix of disbelief and barely contained amusement. They want to send us to a Deathworld as a gift? That's the gist of it, replied Dr. Amelia Cooper, tapping her tablet and projecting a hologram of Terminus. The planet's storm-laden atmosphere flickered ominously. Diamond storms, giant predators, carnivorous plants. It's got it all. They even threw in volcanic death pits for variety. Chief Engineer Victor Wong leaned over the display, his lips curling into a grin. Diamond storms? That sounds like free building material to me. You're kidding, right? Lieutenant Rodriguez interjected, her voice sharp. This isn't a challenge, Wong. It's a death sentence. Only if you're not creative, Wong shot back. Commander Chen chuckled, his gaze fixed on the hologram. You're missing the point, Rodriguez. This isn't a punishment. It's a dare. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's winning dares. The crew erupted into laughter, though the undertone of tension lingered. Chen leaned forward, his expression turning serious. They think they've outsmarted us, he said. But we're going to show them exactly what happens when you drop humans into the worst situation imaginable. Prep the colony ships. We've got a planet to renovate. The day of the launch arrived with much pomp and ceremony. Alien dignitaries gathered at the galactic docks to witness the humans' departure, their faces a mix of false sympathy and hidden relief. The humans, as expected, leaned into the absurdity of the moment. Smile for the cameras, Chen quipped as he stepped onto the command deck of the Icarus Ascendant. Let them think we're thrilled about this little opportunity. And when we prove them wrong? Cooper asked, raising an eyebrow. Chen smirked, his voice dripping with irony. We'll send them a thank you note, maybe one carved from diamond. As the colony ships descended into the swirling storms of Terminus, the Galactic Council's fleet lingered just long enough to confirm humanity's landing before retreating at full speed. No one wanted to stick around to witness the inevitable carnage. But as the ships touched down, groaning under the weight of the atmosphere, it wasn't despair that filled the humans. It was resolve. Well, Wong said, stepping onto the toxic soil in his heavily reinforced suit, looks like we've got our work cut out for us. Better get started then, Chen replied, his voice steady despite the storm raging around them. Welcome to Terminus. Let's show the galaxy what we're made of. As the diamond shards of the storm sparkled in the dim light, the humans began their first steps into the unknown, already turning threats into opportunities. The winds of Terminus howled like a chorus of banshees, battering the hull of the Icarus Ascendant with relentless fury. Diamond shards ricocheted off the ship's exterior, each impact producing sharp, crystalline pings that echoed through the command deck. Inside, the crew was braced against their consoles, the ship shuddering violently as it fought to stay on course. Stabilizers are redlining, Lieutenant Rodriguez yelled over the cacophony, her fingers flying across her controls. If we don't slow our descent, this welcoming party is going to shred us to pieces. Suggestions? Chen asked, his tone calm despite the chaos. He gripped the back of Rodriguez's chair, his knuckles white. Land faster, Wong said dryly from engineering. Gravity's already pulling us down, might as well lean into it. Leaning into it sounds like a terrible plan, Cooper muttered, but her fingers were already moving to adjust the descent algorithms. Adjusting for a steeper trajectory, everyone hold on to something, or someone. The ship pitched forward sharply, the artificial gravity struggling to keep up. Chen nearly lost his footing, catching himself against the console just in time. Through the viewport, the surface of Terminus came into focus. A jagged, alien landscape of crystalline forests, molten rivers, and ominous storms that glowed faintly with charged energy. Beautiful, isn't it? Wong remarked, a note of genuine awe creeping into his voice. Beautiful like a knife to the gut, Rodriguez snapped, her hands steady on the controls as the ship finally began to level out. The Icarus Ascendant slammed into the surface moments later with a bone-rattling jolt. The lights flickered, sparks flying from overstressed consoles, and for a heartbeat, the command deck went silent, except for the groaning of the hull. Status? Chen asked, his voice cutting through the silence. Alive, Cooper said, coughing as she waved away a cloud of smoke. Barely. Ship's in one piece, Wong added, his voice crackling over the comms. Mostly. I'll need to check the underside to confirm we didn't just merge with the terrain. Fantastic, Chen said, straightening. Rodriguez, log the time. Humanity's first official crash landing on Terminus. Rodriguez snorted but tapped a few keys to comply. Logged. You want me to note how close we came to decorating the landscape with our flaming debris? Chen grinned. Save it for the report. Outside, the storm raged on, its winds hurling razor-sharp shards of diamond against the ship. The sound was constant, a relentless reminder of the planet's hostility. But humanity hadn't come this far to be cowed by a bit of bad weather. Suit up, Chen ordered, his voice cutting through the crackling comms. It's time to say hello to our new home. The first step onto Terminus's surface was met with a crunch that reverberated through Chen's environmental suit. Beneath his boots, the ground was a mix of jagged crystals and obsidian-like rock, shimmering faintly in the storm's eerie light. The air was a toxic swirl of gases, thick and acrid, forcing the team to rely entirely on their suits. Well, Wong said, stepping out behind him, his suit clanking under the weight of reinforced plating. This isn't the worst place I've set foot on. That's a terrifying statement, Rodriguez replied, scanning the horizon. Her visor highlighted towering crystalline formations in the distance, their jagged peaks glinting ominously. Eyes up, Chen said. The Council might have thought this planet would keep us busy, but that doesn't mean we're alone. Zhang, report. Movement at 2 o'clock. Specialist Zhang called over the comms, his voice tight. Big. Fast. Chen turned just in time to see the creature emerge from the crystalline forest. It was unlike anything they'd encountered before, a monstrous hybrid of plated armor and sinewy muscle, with too many legs and a head that looked designed for pulverizing. Plasma-like energy rippled along its spine, glowing faintly in the storm's dim light. Well, that's new, Wong muttered. The creature let out a bone-shaking roar and charged. Scatter! Chen barked, his instincts kicking in. The team moved instantly, their training taking over as the beast closed the distance with terrifying speed. Rodriguez unloaded her rifle, the high-pitched whine of the energy bolts piercing the storm's howling. The shots struck the creature's armor but didn't even slow it down. It shrugged off the impacts like an elephant brushing away flies. Conventional fire's useless, Rodriguez shouted. Suggestions? Gravity, Wong said, his voice crackling over the comms. Find a way to trip it. On it! Private Thompson yelled, sprinting across the uneven terrain. In one hand he carried a length of cable, the other clutching his rifle for balance. The creature roared again, its glowing spines flaring as it zeroed in on Thompson. The young soldier didn't falter, his movements precise as he looped the cable around a jagged crystal formation and held his ground. Come on, you overgrown bulldozer, Thompson muttered, his voice tight. Let's see how you handle a face plant. At the last second, Thompson dove out of the way. The creature barreled straight into the cable, its momentum carrying it forward as the cable caught and yanked its legs out from under it. The ground shook as it crashed into a ravine, its roars fading into the distance. Creative use of profanity, Cooper noted as she jogged up to Thompson, her scanner already running. Seems to attract their attention. Noted for the tactical handbook, Chen said, helping Thompson to his feet. Good work, Private. The team regrouped near the crash site, the wind beginning to die down as the storm moved further along the horizon. The air still crackled with residual energy, the faint scent of ozone seeping through their suit filters. This planet, Rodriguez said, shaking her head, is trying very hard to kill us. That's what makes it perfect, Wong replied, his grin audible through the comms. The Council thinks this place will break us, but they've forgotten one thing. And what's that? Cooper asked, arching a brow. Wong gestured at the landscape, his voice filled with defiance. Earth was no picnic either. We're here because we're the species that doesn't quit. We'll turn this death trap into a fortress. Chen nodded, his gaze sweeping the horizon. First we survive, then we innovate. Let's get to work. The humans began their first steps toward adapting to Terminus, their minds already spinning with possibilities. The planet had underestimated them. The Council had underestimated them. But humanity? Humanity had never underestimated itself. The dawn on Terminus wasn't like any dawn on Earth. The sun barely pierced the dense, storm-laden atmosphere. Its light fractured into a kaleidoscope of colors by the swirling diamond dust in the air. It cast jagged rainbows across the landscape, turning the jagged, crystalline trees and molten rivers into something that would have been beautiful if it weren't so deadly. Inside Murphy's Landing, the humans' first settlement, the mood was as sharp as the air outside. The outpost was a patchwork of salvaged ship parts, hastily reinforced shelters, and raw ingenuity. The walls hummed faintly with the charge of energy shields they barely understood, but had no choice but to rely on. "Morning meeting, people," Commander Chen announced, his voice cutting through the low murmur of the base's makeshift mess hall. The room fell silent as the crew gathered, weary but focused. Chen stood at the head of a long table, a holographic map of Terminus hovering above it, the storm patterns and jagged terrain blinking faintly. "Last night we survived our first week on Terminus," Chen began, his tone even but edged with grit. Survived being the key word. If we're going to do more than just scrape by, we need to start turning this planet's death traps into resources. Wong, give us the rundown. Chief Engineer Wong stood, his rugged face illuminated by the hologram. "The diamond storms? They're not just weather, they're powerhouses. Those crystals have a natural charge, like a massive atmospheric battery. If we can find a way to harness that energy without getting skewered, we'll have a renewable power source." "You want to farm diamond storms?" Lieutenant Rodriguez asked, incredulous. "The storms that try to turn us into human shish kebabs?" "Exactly," Wong said with a grin. "Think of it as aggressive solar power." "That's insane," Cooper muttered, though her eyes gleamed with reluctant intrigue. "Insanely brilliant." "Thank you, Doctor," Wong replied, his tone smug. "I'll take the compliment." "And the fauna?" Chen pressed. "Any progress?" Dr. Amelia Cooper tapped her tablet, and the hologram shifted to display a massive, six-legged creature, a crystal crawler. Its body gleamed like cut glass, the joints pulsing faintly with energy. "We've been observing the smaller predators," Cooper said. "These crawlers? They process raw crystal formations for nutrients. If we can domesticate them, they could mine resources for us." Rodriguez snorted. "You want us to make pets out of walking murder machines?" "No," Cooper replied sharply. "I want us to turn them into tools. There's a difference." Chen nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Good. Make it happen. If this planet wants to kill us, it's only fair we put it to work." The meeting broke with renewed determination, the crew dispersing to their respective tasks. Outside, the air crackled with residual energy from the storms, the atmosphere buzzing faintly in the human suits as they ventured out into the hostile terrain. Wong led a small team to the edge of the settlement where the diamond storm had passed just hours earlier. The ground was littered with razor-sharp fragments of crystal, their edges catching the fractured sunlight. "Careful," Wong warned, picking up a shard with gloved hands. "This stuff's volatile. Too much pressure and—" The shard exploded in a sharp pop, sending flecks of crystal flying. Wong flinched, shaking the remnants from his glove. "Like I said, volatile, great," Rodriguez muttered, scanning the field with her rifle ready. "Because this job wasn't dangerous enough already." "You know you love it," Wong quipped, gesturing for the team to start collecting samples. "Let's get to work." Back at the base, Cooper was neck-deep in research, her workspace a chaotic tangle of cables, data pads, and glowing crystal samples. The hum of equipment filled the room, mingling with the faint hum of Terminus's alien atmosphere that seemed to seep through every crack. "Cooper!" Chen's voice crackled over the comms, breaking her concentration. "Any progress?" "Some," she replied, not looking up. "These crystals aren't just raw materials. They're alive, in a sense. They interact with the atmosphere, absorbing and storing energy. It's like they're part of the planet's ecosystem." "And how does that help us?" Chen asked, his tone patient but firm. "If we can stabilize the charge," Cooper continued, her fingers flying across her tablet, "we could use them to power our shields, maybe even our weapons." "Do it," Chen said simply. "Whatever it takes." By the third day of experiments, the team had their first breakthrough. Wong's modified shield generators were rigged to absorb energy from the storm, converting the chaotic charge into a stable power source. It wasn't perfect. Every surge of energy rattled the equipment dangerously, but it was a start. The first successful test lit up the base like a miniature star, the lights flickering to life with a soft hum. The crew cheered, their voices echoing through the tight corridors. "Not bad for a bunch of refugees on a Deathworld," Wong said, his grin broad as he slapped the generator affectionately. Meanwhile, Cooper's experiments with the crawlers were proving equally fruitful and equally dangerous. The creatures were territorial and aggressive, but they had a predictable pattern. They fed on raw crystal deposits, grinding the material into fine dust. "We need to lure one into the containment field," Cooper explained to Rodriguez as they set up a bait station near a crystal outcrop. "Once it's trapped, I can run tests." "Sure," Rodriguez replied dryly, scanning the horizon, "because nothing sounds safer than baiting a giant walking blender." The crawler appeared at dusk, its 6 legs moving with unnerving grace as it approached the crystal bait. The air thrummed faintly with the energy it radiated, its body shimmering in the dim light. "Steady," Cooper murmured, her fingers hovering over the controls. The containment field snapped into place with a hiss of energy, trapping the creature in a glowing barrier. It roared in protest, slamming against the field with its crystalline body, but the barrier held. "Gotcha," Cooper said, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. "Let's see what makes you tick." As the days passed, Murphy's Landing transformed. The humans repurposed the crystal shards into reinforced walls, using the storm's remnants to fortify their defenses. Energy harvested from the storms powered their shields, lights, and even their makeshift fabricators. The crawlers, once a deadly nuisance, became unwitting allies, their natural mining instincts redirected to process resources for the base. Inside the settlement, the mood shifted. The initial desperation gave way to a cautious optimism, the crew finding pride in their ingenuity. "You know what's funny?" Wong said one evening, standing atop the settlement's wall as the diamond storms raged in the distance. "The council thought this planet would break us." Rodriguez joined him, her rifle slung over her shoulder. "Yeah. Guess they didn't realize we'd just break it first." Below them, the settlement glowed faintly in the fractured light of Terminus, a beacon of defiance against the hostile world. The humans weren't just surviving anymore. They were thriving, and the planet's resources, once threats, were becoming the foundation of their future. And this was only the beginning. The hum of progress filled Murphy's Landing, a sound that had become as comforting as the rhythmic thrum of heartbeats. Walls reinforced with diamond crystals shimmered in the twilight, casting fractured rainbows across the settlement. The settlement was no longer just a patchwork of salvaged ships and hasty improvisation. It had become a fortress. Every edge, every wall, and every piece of technology now bore the unmistakable mark of human ingenuity. Brutal efficiency wrapped in audacious creativity. Wong stood at the edge of the newly installed energy array, a massive, skeletal structure jutting into the storm-laden sky. The device hummed faintly, its conduits glowing with harvested energy from the most recent diamond storm. Lightning forked in the distance, illuminating the alien landscape in fleeting flashes. "Another successful harvest," Wong said, his voice crackling over the comms. "We're up to 150% capacity. Hell, we're making so much power now I could run a small moon." "That's great," Rodriguez's voice replied, tinged with her signature sarcasm. "Any plans to share some of that extra juice with the coffee machine? It's been making sludge for weeks." "I'll consider it," Wong quipped, his grin audible. "Assuming you survive your next babysitting mission." Rodriguez snorted. "I'm watching one of those crawlers mine crystals, Wong, not taking on a predator barehanded." "Yet," Wong countered, chuckling. Inside the settlement's research hub, Cooper and her team worked tirelessly. The captured crystal crawler, now more cooperative after weeks of testing, moved methodically in its enclosure, grinding raw crystals into fine powder. Its iridescent exoskeleton glowed faintly, reflecting the ambient light of the lab. "Behavioral patterns are stabilizing," Cooper muttered, logging her observations. "They seem to respond well to consistent stimuli, It's almost like training a particularly stubborn dog. Except this dog can crush steel with its jaws, Rodriguez added, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. She watched as the crawler deposited its latest haul into a containment chamber. You're sure it's not going to decide it doesn't like us anymore? As long as we keep it fed, it'll behave, Cooper replied. Besides, it's not like we're asking it to do anything it doesn't already do naturally. We're just guiding it. Rodriguez arched an eyebrow. You mean exploiting it? Semantics, Cooper shot back. If this works, we can scale it up. A whole fleet of these things could mine resources faster than we ever could with traditional equipment. And when the council comes sniffing around again? Rodriguez asked. You think they'll just let us keep all this? Cooper's lips curved into a sly smile. By the time they notice, it won't matter what they want. The breakthrough came 3 days later. A shard of crystal harvested during the latest storm pulsed with an unusual frequency, so subtle it had almost gone unnoticed. Cooper's scanners detected faint patterns in the energy emissions, patterns that resembled rudimentary signals. It's not just a power source, Cooper explained during the emergency briefing. These crystals are computational. They're capable of storing and processing information. You're saying they're computers? Chen asked, his brows furrowing as he leaned over the glowing shard on the table. Not just computers, Cooper said, her excitement barely contained. They're networks. The entire planet is one massive quantum grid, and we've barely scratched the surface. Wong let out a low whistle. So you're telling me we've been sitting on the galaxy's biggest hard drive this whole time? Essentially, Cooper replied. And if we can tap into it? She didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications were staggering. The crew sat in stunned silence for a moment, the weight of their discovery sinking in. How do we start? Chen finally asked, his voice steady. Cooper's smile widened. We already have. The days that followed were a blur of feverish activity. Cooper's team worked around the clock, reverse engineering the crystal's properties and developing interfaces to communicate with the quantum grid. The first prototype, a crude jury-rigged device cobbled together from salvaged ship parts and crystal fragments, was a resounding success. It's like hacking into the universe's operating system, Wong marveled, watching the prototype display data streams that seemed to defy conventional logic. This thing doesn't just calculate, it predicts. The applications were limitless. Within weeks, Murphy's Landing was transformed. The settlement's defenses were upgraded with adaptive shields that could repel even the most violent storms. The crystal-powered systems learned and evolved, becoming more efficient with each iteration. Energy weapons were enhanced with pinpoint accuracy and devastating power, capable of slicing through the densest materials. And it wasn't just the technology that was advancing. The settlements themselves were expanding. New outposts, Darwin's Folly, Newton's Nemesis, and Prometheus Point, rose from the hostile terrain, each one more ambitious than the last. Each settlement specialized in a different field: biological research, energy production, and quantum computing. Murphy's Landing became the hub of it all, a sprawling network of innovation that thrummed with the combined efforts of humanity's best and brightest. But their success hadn't gone unnoticed. On the fringes of Terminus's atmosphere, a Achaean trading vessel hovered nervously, its sleek design dwarfed by the planet's stormy expanse. The captain, a wiry creature with too many eyes and not enough patience, hesitated before opening a transmission. "This is Commander Chen of Murphy's Landing," a voice crackled through their comms. "State your business." The Achaean captain cleared its throat, a wet, unpleasant sound. We were not expecting this." Chen's tone was casual, almost amused. "Expecting what? Survivors? A thriving colony? State-of-the-art technology? You'll have to be more specific." The alien captain shifted uncomfortably. "The Council sent you here to contain you. This was meant to be a Deathworld." Chen's laughter was sharp and humorless. "Well, you'll have to let the Council know they underestimated us. Now, are you here to trade, or just to gawk?" The Achaean captain hesitated. Then, with visible reluctance, they transmitted their trade request. Chen leaned back in his chair, grinning as he watched the requests scroll across the screen. First trade request from an alien civilization, he mused aloud. Better make this one count. Within days, word of humanity's survival and their burgeoning technological revolution spread across the galaxy. Alien traders flocked to Terminus, each one eager to secure a piece of the humans' innovations. The Council's carefully orchestrated exile was unraveling before their eyes. In the Galactic Council chamber, panic reigned. High Chancellor Velar Matik's crystalline form pulsed erratically as they reviewed the latest reports. "They've weaponized the storms," Valar intoned, their voice vibrating with barely contained fury. "They've turned predators into tools. They've created quantum computing systems that make our own look like children's toys." Representative Zix 427 clicked their mandibles nervously. "We should have destroyed them when we had the chance." "It's too late for that," Valar snapped. "Now we have to contain the damage." But back on Terminus, the humans weren't thinking about containment. They were thinking about expansion. As the first alien trade ships docked at Murphy's Landing, Chen stood on the observation deck, watching the crystalline storms rage harmlessly against their adaptive shields. "They thought they were sending us to our doom," he said, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Rodriguez joined him, her arms crossed. "And instead, they handed us the galaxy's greatest treasure." Chen's smile widened. "Let's make sure they never forget it." The air inside Murphy's Landing was charged with anticipation. The hum of activity echoed through the settlement's labyrinthine halls, where traders, researchers, and engineers bustled between workstations glowing with alien and human technology fused together. Every corridor bore the marks of humanity's ingenuity, conduits pulsing with crystalline energy, walls reinforced with diamond storm byproducts, and holographic displays tracking trade routes, storm patterns, and quantum processing outputs. What had started as a desperate outpost was now the nerve center of an intergalactic phenomenon. Commander Chen stood on the observation deck, watching as another alien trade vessel descended through Terminus's turbulent atmosphere. The shields around the settlement flared briefly as the ship entered, the energy bending and shimmering like a liquid mirror. Beyond the walls, the diamond storms raged, their jagged beauty casting shimmering reflections across the landscape. Inside, humanity thrived. "Another one?" Rodriguez said as she joined Chen, her voice tinged with disbelief. "That makes, what, 3 today?" "4, Chen corrected, his expression calm, but his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Word's spreading faster than I expected. They're desperate for what we have." "And what exactly are we giving them?" she asked, leaning against the railing. "Enough to keep them coming back," Chen replied, "but not enough to give them an edge. We're not just building trade relations, we're building leverage." Behind them, the trade delegation began to disembark. A group of gangly insectoid beings from the Nest Confederation scuttled down the ramp, their mandibles clicking nervously. They were led by none other than Zix 427, the same representative who had voted to exile humanity to Terminus. "Well," Zix said, their voice buzzing through the translator, "I must admit, I didn't expect this." "Few did," Chen said, his tone neutral but his posture radiating confidence. "Welcome to Terminus. What can we do for you?" Zix hesitated, their many eyes flicking nervously around the settlement. "We're interested in your quantum crystalline processing technology. It's unique." "Unique is one word for it," Rodriguez muttered under her breath. Chen ignored her, his smile as sharp as the storms outside. "Of course. We're open to trade negotiations, though I should warn you. Our prices reflect the value of our work." Zix's mandibles twitched in what might have been irritation. Naturally. The negotiations that followed were tense, filled with veiled barbs and strategic pauses. Chen played his role perfectly, balancing politeness with an undercurrent of dominance. By the time the deal was signed, the Nest Confederation had secured a shipment of crystal processors, and humanity had secured another foothold in galactic politics. "Pleasure doing business with you," Chen said as Zix scuttled back to their ship, their antennae drooping slightly. Once the aliens were out of earshot, Rodriguez shook her head. I can't believe they're coming to us for help. Didn't they try to kill us less than a year ago? They didn't try to kill us, Chen corrected. They tried to contain us. Big difference. And now? She asked. Now they're realizing we're not something they can contain, Chen said, his voice quiet but firm. We've become indispensable. Back in the research hub, Cooper and Wong were neck-deep in their latest project. The prototype for humanity's first fully integrated quantum crystalline AI was nearing completion, a glowing orb of pulsing energy suspended in a containment field. Around it, holographic displays flickered with streams of data that defied conventional understanding. This is insane, Wong said, his voice filled with a mix of awe and exhaustion. We're not just building a computer. We're building something that thinks faster than we can. That's the point, Cooper replied, not looking up from her console. If we're going to stay ahead of the Council, we need more than ingenuity. We need speed. Wong frowned, tapping a few commands into his tablet. What happens if this thing decides it doesn't like us? Cooper glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Then we remind it who built it. The AI came online later that night, its containment field glowing brighter as it began to process its surroundings. The orb pulsed rhythmically, emitting a faint hum that seemed to resonate with the walls of the lab. State your designation, Cooper said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. The orb flickered once, then emitted a crystalline, almost melodic voice. Designation pending. Awaiting input. Let's call it Nexus, Wong suggested. Nexus, the AI repeated. Acknowledged. What is my purpose? To make us unstoppable, Cooper said, a small smile tugging at her lips. Nexus proved its worth almost immediately. Within days, it had optimized the settlement's energy systems, enhanced their weaponry, and developed new methods for navigating Terminus's hazardous terrain. It also began analyzing the planet's quantum grid, uncovering secrets that even Cooper hadn't anticipated. This planet isn't just alive, Nexus reported during a briefing. It is evolving. Its systems are adapting to our presence. Good, Chen said. That means we're doing something right. But not everyone in the galaxy was pleased with humanity's progress. In the Galactic Council chamber, the mood was grim. Reports of humanity's advancements were arriving faster than the Council could process them, each one more alarming than the last. They've turned Terminus into a fortress, High Chancellor Vaylor intoned, their crystalline form dimming with frustration. And now they're selling technology that surpasses anything we've ever seen. They've weaponized their exile, Zix 427 added, their mandibles clicking nervously. We gave them a Deathworld, and they turned it into a factory. We must act, Vaylor said, their voice vibrating with authority. If humanity continues unchecked, they will dominate us all. But even as the Council debated their next move, humanity was taking its dominance to the next level. Nexus had developed a new technology, quantum tunneling, that allowed instantaneous travel between points in space. The implications were staggering. It's not just faster than light, Cooper explained during a demonstration. It's beyond light. We're rewriting the rules of space-time. The first test of the quantum tunneling system was a resounding success. A cargo ship disappeared from Terminus and reappeared in a neighboring star system in less than a second, its crew unharmed and its cargo intact. Distance is now a suggestion, Wong said with a grin as he watched the data stream in. The Council's trade routes? Obsolete. Chen nodded, his expression thoughtful. Good. Let's make sure they know it. The unveiling of the technology sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Alien traders flocked to Terminus, desperate to secure access to humanity's latest invention. The Council, meanwhile, scrambled to maintain control. They're becoming a superpower, Vaylor said during an emergency session. And it's our fault. Back on Terminus, humanity's influence continued to grow. The settlements expanded into cities, their gleaming structures a testament to human resilience. Controlled diamond storms now lit up the night sky in dazzling displays, their energy fueling the most advanced civilization the galaxy had ever seen. Chen stood on the observation deck of Prometheus Point, the newest and most ambitious settlement. Below him, The city pulsed with life, its streets bustling with activity. Above, the storms raged harmlessly against the shields, their energy redirected into the settlement's grid. "We've done the impossible," Rodriguez said as she joined him, her voice filled with quiet pride. "And we're just getting started," Chen replied. As the first alien dignitaries arrived to negotiate trade agreements, Chen couldn't help but smile. Humanity had taken a death sentence and turned it into a foundation for greatness. They weren't just surviving on Terminus. They were thriving, and the galaxy was taking notice. "Let's show them what happens when you bet against humanity," Chen said, his voice filled with determination. The future was theirs to shape.